Hello and welcome to Chapter Book Storytime. I'm Ellen from EVPL Oakland, and on today's edition of the Variety Pack, I have a new book by an acclaimed author. It's called Falling Out of Time by Margaret Peterson Haddix. Have you heard of her? She's written a lot of great series for young people, and one of her most famous series, I think, is called The Shadow Children. And the first one in that series is Among the Hidden. But the cool thing about Margaret Peterson Haddix's book is that it's a companion novel to a book that was written 27 years ago. The book is called Running Out of Time. And Haddix says this was her first novel, and after she wrote it, a lot of readers wrote to her and said, "Would you please write a sequel? We want to know what happens to the characters in this story." Well, she thought a lot about it, and her readers had all kinds of suggestions and ideas, but she thought about it, and 27 years later, she comes up with Running Out of Time. This story is set 170 years in the future, 2193. 12-year-old Zola thinks she has the perfect life. She thinks everyone does, now that it's 2193 and humanity has solved all its problems. Insta-Closets deliver new clothes every morning. Insta-Ovens deliver gourmet meals on demand, and virtual reality goggles let her have any adventure she wants with friends from all over the world. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Let's find out what happens. Falling Out of Time. Now, you can read Running Out of Time first, but I've read the first few chapters of this one, and Haddix fills you in on what happened in the first novel, since they are linked together. So you could read this one by itself. Chapter 1. Zola's entire room began to glow, the sign that it was ready. "Tahiti," Zola mumbled from her cozy nest of blankets and pillows. Even though she'd been sound asleep a moment earlier, she bolted upright, her eyes open wide. When she was little, she'd been convinced that if she sat up fast enough, she'd catch the picture wall opposite her bed in its exact moment of change. She'd believed that she might see pixies or elves scattering sand right up to the foot of her bed. She might see the ocean rolling in from the other side of the globe to lap gently at her toes. But Zola was 12 now, and sitting up quickly was only a habit, a silly one. She knew that the picture wall was only an illusion. She knew that the sensation of sand squishing between her toes and being washed away by sun-warmed water and gentle beach breezes was just as unreal. She'd even done a report at school once about technology that made it all happen. She supposed it truly was amazing that the picture wall worked so seamlessly with the tiny electrodes embedded in her comforter to make her feel as though she were waking up in a tropical paradise. But it was hard to stay amazed by something that happened every morning. Zola slumped back against the throne of pillows behind her. For a moment, she regarded the glorious sunrise over water that the picture wall was showing her. It was so beautiful, the first rays of light reaching the peaks of the waves. Her picture wall request the day before had been beautiful too. She'd watched the sun rising over the Alps. That one had included the sensation that she was drinking hot chocolate, which she knew was only from the odor of cocoa being piped into her room. But sometimes it was nice to have taste buds that were easily tricked. The day before, she'd awakened in the midst of sequoia trees in California. Before that, she'd been on a savanna watching elephants meander by. And before that, she didn't really quite remember. Who cared? It had all been beautiful. Zola was supposed to lie in bed and watch the entire sunrise. That was supposed to grant her a peaceful waking, a peaceful day, a happy life. But somehow Zola didn't have the patience for the picture wall's whole glorious cycle of scenes today. "You know what, Siri Alexa Google," she said out loud, addressing the artificial intelligence that governed her room's scenes and sensations, as well as pretty much everything else around her. "Just make my wall normal again." "By normal, do you mean typical?" Siri Alexa's disembodied voice echoed around her. "By my calculations, the scene you request most often is a Pacific beach. But would you prefer one in Hawaii instead? Bora Bora, the Philippines?" I mean, just make the wall look like it really looks, Zola said through gritted teeth, without any scene at all. Like, nowhere. 𝑎𝑙𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 made a sound that would have been a harumph if it had been a human. Your house is a place too, the AI corrected in its usual know-it-all tone. Even a bare wall is... Just do it, Zola said. Please. 𝑎𝑙𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 obeyed. The wall across from Zola's bed instantly went blank. Without the imaginary sand, sun, water, and palm trees, Zola could see how empty her room really was. A plain desk stood against the wall to the left, unadorned for once by any picture wall-style transformation of its own. To the right was the floor-to-ceiling Insta-Closet, where Zola could trade in her clothes anytime she wanted. And besides the Insta-Closet was the door out into the rest of the house. A door that opened, even as Zola glanced at it. Right on cue, Zola thought. Good morning to you, lucky girl, Zola's mom exclaimed as she stepped into the room, her usual greeting. What glorious scene shall we enjoy today? Zola saw the confusion spread over her mother's face. Mom's usual cheery grin slipped, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. But when Mom dropped her hand again, her smile was back. It seemed just more fake than usual. Mom sank down gently onto the side of Zola's bed, perching on the very edge, as if she wasn't sure Zola wanted her there or not. Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Mom asked, her voice unimaginably soft and kind. Anything you'd like to share? Oh no, Zola thought, what have I done? When Zola was younger, she'd loved the way Mom could seem to understand Zola's every emotion, Zola's every mood. She'd loved the way Mom had lifted one eyebrow as she gazed at her, the way Mom's blue eyes glowed with sympathy, the way Mom always wanted to help. More and more often lately, though, Zola just wanted some privacy. Was it weird that I had 𝑎𝑙𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 shut down the picture wall, she wondered? Why did I do that? For an instant, Zola considered lying and claiming the picture wall had broken somehow. But technology didn't break. Not anymore. Perfect tech had been around since at least the early 2100s, almost a full century. And anyhow, even if Mom couldn't see through such a lie, 𝑎𝑙𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 would tattle. The various mood sensors and monitors in her room were probably already measuring tiny changes in her expression, her temperature, her body language. She was probably only moments away from being sent to counseling that would simultaneously assure her that everything she felt and did was completely normal for someone her age, but also that she needed hours with the digital therapist to get through it. That had happened before. I just wanted to see the regular wall, Zola stammered. I wanted to remind myself what's really there. Mom froze, her eyebrows still cocked, her sympathetic gaze almost painfully intense. For a second, Zola felt like she had after shutting down the picture wall, as if she was seeing Mom's real face for once, not the cheerful mask she always wore. Then Mom laughed and reached out to ruffle Zola's hair. Poor kid, she said, forced to wake up in paradise every day, a paradise you get to choose. Yeah, but then I'd have to get up and go to school, Zola groused half-heartedly. You like school, Mom said. You are lucky. It felt like Mom was groping her way back to their usual script, a typical morning conversation. That was fine with Zola. She really didn't want some long, drawn-out interrogation about what was going on inside Zola's head, or why she'd had such a strange impulse this morning to want to see a blank wall. I know, Zola said quickly. I'm so much better than you were as a kid. Mom still looked a little shaken, so Zola joked. Didn't you have to walk 10 miles through blizzards to get to school? And it was uphill in both directions? Mom didn't laugh the way Zola expected. Where'd you get that line? Mom asked, her voice gone stiff. When Zola glanced over at her, Mom's artificially wrinkleless face was completely taut. If Zola hadn't known better, she would have said Mom looked scared, terrified even. But that wasn't possible. It was 2193, and fear, like unreliable technology, was a thing of the past. Relax, Mom, Zola rolled her eyes as she scrambled out of bed. "I'm not accusing you of being 100 years old. Or would it be 200? I heard that saying in school, in one of the history VRs. It's something parents used to say to kids. I know that even when you were a kid, school was always virtual too. You didn't have to walk anywhere except for exercise." "Right," Mom said, settling back more comfortably against the multiple pillows of Zola's bed. "Anyways, if I was truly lucky, my Insta-Closet really would work instantly," Zola muttered, tapping impatiently on the screen on the closet's door. She'd actually ordered an outfit the night before, but she always thought of last-minute changes. The screen showed a countdown clock, and Zola groaned. "Oh, 5 minutes is way too long to have to wait for new clothes." "Recycled," Mom corrected. "The Insta-Closet recycles clothes." Zola didn't bother rolling her eyes again. It was so annoying how Mom always did that, constantly reminding Zola how wonderful the technology was in their home, how lucky they were to be living in 2193. But at least it was normal for Mom to be this annoying. Zola knew from the history VRs at school how it used to be for kids. 100 years ago, or, well, 200 years ago anyway, kids getting ready for school in the morning didn't have to deal with parents lolling around their kids' rooms expecting to have meaningful conversations. Back then, the parents were also rushing around getting ready for work, fixing breakfast, taking care of younger kids, because people used to have bigger families. Parents back then had sometimes ignored their kids completely. Right now, that sounded wonderful to Zola. But Zola was, as Mom constantly reminded her, the sun, the moon, and the stars to her mother. Zola's full name, Zola Luna Stella Keyser, was supposed to reflect that. Luna did mean moon, and Stella did mean stars. But Zola actually meant earth, not sun. "You might as well have named me Dirt," Zola had complained when she found out during a school project about self-identity. "Why didn't you and Dad just ask Siri Alexa Google before you put it on the birth certificate?" "Oh, we were young and in love and so excited about our new baby. We didn't want to even spare a moment for research like that," Mom had said. Zola could have continued the argument because how was it research to ask Siri Alexa a question? Everybody did that all the time. But the sad, dreamy look in Mom's eyes stopped her. Dad had died when Zola was only 2 days old. Now Zola truly was all Mom had. Zola really should be nicer and not so determined to argue with her mother all the time. The Insta-Closet gave a cheerful ding and spoke in its usual snobby-sounding voice. "The outfit you requested has been now prepared. It's ready for your donning." "Cyrilex," Zola said, "reprogram the Insta-Closet voice. I want something slangier from now on. More fun." "Your desire has been noted, and that wish shall be granted," Cyrilex responded instantly. "Change yours, too," Zola commanded. "Sure thing, kiddo." Zola heard Mom sigh, but Zola tuned that out. The door of the Insta-Closet automatically clicked open. When Zola was little, she had asked Mom once, "What would happen if I was inside the Insta-Closet when it was making my clothes?" Disappointingly, Mom had said only, "That's not possible. There are all sorts of safeguards to prevent that." But as a small child, Zola had been a little obsessed. She'd had nightmares about being knit into her own clothes. She'd had nightmares about things climbing out of the Insta-Closet in the middle of the night. Things that weren't clothes. But even as a small child, Zola had known better than to ask Mom or Cyrilex about that. They just would have sent her to more long, boring sessions with the kindergarten transition counselor. Zola gave a sigh of her own and stepped into the Insta-Closet, pulling the door shut behind her. Instantly, she felt better. As much as she'd feared the Insta-Closet when she was little, she loved it now. It was soundproof. Mom couldn't keep yammering at her while she was getting dressed. And it was completely private. Besides the bathroom, this was the only place Zola ever entered where there weren't security or mood sensor cameras silently recording every moment of her life. Automatically, as she always did, Zola stuck out her tongue at the mirrored wall facing her. "Mirror, mirror on the wall," she thought, a line from an old fairy tale where kids took turns asking, "Who's the bravest of them all? Who's the kindest of them all? Who's the hardest working of them all, etc. It was a dull story, and illogical too, because a mirror couldn't tell you any of that. A mirror could tell you that you had straight, light brown hair like your mom's, and that when you looked at a mirror, you preferred to make silly faces. And of course, until Zola had reprogrammed it to stay silent, the mirror had always said encouraging slogans every morning like, "You look ready for a great day," and "I can tell just by looking that you are a wonderful person." Why would anyone need to hear that every morning? Why would anyone trust a talking mirror? Zola rolled her eyes at the mirror and turned to take today's newly refabricated outfit from the hanger beside her. She just detached the swingy purple top from the hanger when something fell to the floor. Well, that was odd because Zola hadn't asked for any belts or beads or bows or any other accessories. The clothing she'd requested shouldn't have come with any tiny fussy parts that could fall off. She bent down. The thing on the floor was a scrap of paper. Paper! Who even used that anymore except in obscure retro artwork? The paper was folded over twice. Zola's experience with paper was almost all virtual. She'd had that one art history class about origami, which had given the illusion that they were working with real paper. Maybe that was why it felt instinctive to scoop up the paper and take it by its corners and pull them open, flattening the paper into the palm of her hand. Now, Zola could see writing, actual handwriting, that must have been done with an actual old-fashioned pencil or pen, and she could make out words in one large scrawl. "If you want to see things as they really are, come find me and help us." Chapter 2. Zola blinked, not believing her own eyes. But this wasn't like some dream or VR game where things appeared and disappeared at will. The paper stayed in her hand. The words, "and help us," kept staring up at her, silently begging. Now she also noticed another line, much smaller, at the bottom of the page. "But don't let anyone see this note." What? For a moment, Zola felt a jolt of something like hope or excitement. Someone needed her help. She could make a difference. This wasn't like being asked to be brave or heroic in some stupid history VR, where the right choices were always so obvious and already accomplished anyway. Oppose the Nazis, speak out against racism, stop the Spanish Inquisition. Duh. Then Zola's brain kicked in. Of course this note couldn't be real. Zola slammed her shoulder against the door of the Insta-Closet, bursting back out into her bedroom. She clutched the paper note in her hand and held it high over her head. "Mom, this isn't fair," she complained. "If school's going to spring surprise moral dilemma homework assignments on me, even when I'm getting dressed in the morning, that's wrong. We studied this in school. People have a right to their own leisure time outside of work or school, and..." Mom scrambled up from Zola's bed as quickly as if the bed had burst into flames. Mom was middle-aged and, Zola had always thought, a little stodgy. Zola had never seen her move so fast. And Mom was laughing. "Oh, there's some issue with the Insta-Closet, and you think it's a moral dilemma test from school?" Mom asked, sounding all jolly and amused. "Don't tell me you're starting that kind of teenage drama already." "Mom, you know I'm not a teenager yet," Zola protested. "And this isn't drama. Don't..." She had all sorts of indignant responses on the tip of her tongue. "Don't assume I'm overreacting when you don't even know what I'm talking about. Don't belittle me and my experiences. Don't laugh at me." But it suddenly struck Zola that Mom's laughter and words and tone didn't match the way she was sprinting across the room. The way Mom was running? Mom, who never ran anywhere. You'd think Zola herself had just burst into flames, and Mom was desperate to tackle her and roll her on the floor and put the fire out to save Zola's life. And it wasn't Mom who usually accused her of drama. It was Cyrilex. Mom reached Zola's side and grabbed first for Zola's hand, the hand that clutched the paper. Mom's hand covered Zola's. Then Mom yanked Zola's arm down and drew her close. "I do remember what it felt like to be a teenager and a preteen, and so filled with big emotions," Mom said, patting Zola's back. "Does somebody just need a hug?" No, now I just need to punch something, Zola thought. She would have jerked away, but Mom was tugging her back into the Insta-Closet. Zola had been ordering her own clothes and dressing herself alone in the Insta-Closet since she was 4. Now that Zola was 12 and just as tall as Mom, there really wasn't room for both of them in that small cubicle. Not comfortably, anyway. But Mom started pulling the door shut. "Oh, you say the problem was behind the door?" Mom asked loudly, even though Zola had said no such thing. "It was probably just your imagination, but we'll check it out." The door latched behind them. Mom let go of Zola's shoulders. "Quick," Mom said, in a pinched, urgent tone that contained none of the humor of only a moment earlier. Mom's face was completely solemn now, her dark blue eyes boring into Zola's hazel ones. It was as if Mom had completely taken off her mask, or discarded an avatar. "We only have a few seconds. Tell me what happened. Did you see someone? Did someone talk to you? Or—" "Nobody else would be in my Insta-Closet," Zola protested automatically, because that was ludicrous. The privacy of an Insta-Closet was almost sacred. But she looked down at the note crumbled in her hand. The way Mom was reacting, did that mean the plea might be real and serious? "But that would mean that I shouldn't tell anyone about it," Zola thought. "Not even Mom." Mom was already looking toward Zola's hand. Zola turned her hand over so the note was hidden again. "Just a note then, huh?" Mom said. "That's right, don't show it to me. It's better that way, especially if they resort to lie detector tests. But I need to deliver a message." She tilted her head back as if she were no longer addressing Zola, even though Zola was the only person in the Insta-Closet. "Leave my daughter alone, do you hear? You know I'm sympathetic to your cause. You know I want to help you, but children are off limits. She's too young for this, all right?" "Mom, who are you talking to?" Zola asked. "What's going on? And what do you mean, lie detector tests?" Mom gazed at her with what appeared to be real sympathy. Zola couldn't remember the last time Mom's face had seemed so sad and soft and unguarded. Was it the unguarded part that Zola had missed? "I'm so sorry, Zola, but there's no time to explain," Mom said. Her voice was achingly gentle now. "To avoid setting off any alarms, we have to get out of here. Once we're back in your bedroom, you need to follow my lead. We have to be careful. I know you weren't overreacting, and I wish I could tell you everything, but it's not safe. Please, please, please don't make a scene. People's lives might depend on it." "People's lives might depend on it?" Zola echoed numbly. "And you're accusing me of being a drama queen?" "People's lives might depend on it" could have been a line from a history VR. It was 2193 now. People were safe. They were always safe. Danger, like fear, was a thing of the past. But Mom didn't answer. She was already unlatching the Insta-Closet door, swinging it open. "That's it," Mom said, the jolliness back in her voice, except now Zola could hear how fake that jolliness was. "Mystery solved. One little scrap of paper from my most recent art experiments show up in your Insta-Closet, and you start acting like it's the crime of the century." Mom was an artist, and she did occasionally use old-fashioned materials like actual paint. So that kind of made sense. But the look she saw at Zola was desperate. Her eyes seemed to be begging Zola to play along. Then Mom stepped out of the Insta-Closet, and there was nothing in her expression but amusement. Zola gulped. "Silly me," she said, her voice a little too shaky. She clutched the edge of the Insta-Closet doorway to steady herself. "But I don't think it was that weird not to want some scrap of your artwork ending up in my recycled clothes." "Oh, the things a kid has to worry about in the 22nd century," Mom mocked, even as she fixed Zola with a warm gaze. The mockery was fake, but the approval and relief in Mom's eyes were real. Weren't they? "Now hurry and get dressed or you'll be late to school," Mom said. Yeah, always with the nagging," Zola griped, hoping she sounded good-natured enough for all the mood sensors in the room. Or if the mood sensors picked up on her tension, she hoped it would seem like she and Mom were just recovering from a typical mother-daughter spat. "Surely all my nagging is the reason you've turned out to be such a great kid," Mom replied. Normally, that would have annoyed Zola beyond belief, but now Zola felt like she'd been handed an instant translator This was how Mom was saying thank you and announcing that Zola was really a great kid for obeying. Maybe everything Mom had said had always been in code. Zola pulled the door of the Insta-Closet shut again, enclosing herself inside, away from Mom. Okay, that was weird, she told her own image in the mirror. In the reflection, her hazel eyes were wide with amazement, and maybe shock too. Her cheeks were flushed. Was someone watching her? Or listening for an answer? Around her, the Insta-Closet looked like it always did. Every wall made of sleek, polished blonde wood that joined with the ceiling and the floor at perfect right angles. The closet held one hook for new outfits and one shelf off to the side for her to deposit the clothes she wanted to return. But the possibility of someone watching meant that she was careful pulling the swingy purple top over her head. She waited until it had settled into place on her shoulders before she shrugged out of her pajama top and dropped it to the floor. And she hunched over as she traded her pajama bottoms for the more snazzily patterned daytime leggings. Mom didn't act like someone was watching, she reminded herself. She acted like someone could hear. She looked at herself in the mirror again. The mirror gleamed extra bright, like it always did when Zola finished dressing. Zola knew that meant sensors had been tripped the moment her pajamas hit the floor. The idea was that she would want to admire herself in her brand new, newly recycled clothes. But Zola didn't spare a second glance at how the clothes fit. She kept her gaze trained on her own face. Maybe she'd been too harsh about the whole mirror, mirror on the wall story. Maybe you could really tell by looking at someone if they were ready to be brave, if they were ready to be kind. Or at least maybe you could tell that when you were looking at your own reflection. No matter what my mom says, I'm not too young, Zola announced. Her voice didn't even quiver. I do want to find you. I do want to help. But how? Chapter 3. Nobody answered. Zola stood waiting long enough to feel ridiculous. What was she expecting? Another note to flutter down? A booming voice to call out, "Great, thanks! Here's what you have to do!" Even if somebody heard me, why would they believe me instead of Mom? The door of the Insta-Closet rattled. So, yeah, your mom's out there freaking out, worrying that she's going to have to send you off to school without breakfast? A voice swelled around Zola. Go on, you got to get some eats. Zola jolted. This wasn't the usual Insta-Closet voice, or the mirror voice, or... Ah, right, Zola remembered. I told Cyrilex, like just 5 minutes ago, that I wanted the Insta-Closet voice to be slangier and more fun. That's all I'm hearing. She was so used to digital voices. How was she supposed to know when someone real started talking to her? The gleaming mirror before her dimmed. Zola knew it had just timed out for a typical admire yourself session for a 12-year-old girl. But it felt like a sign that whoever might have been listening earlier was gone. I'll be back later, Zola vowed. She wasn't sure if she was making that promise to herself or the mystery listener. I'll figure this out. I'm not giving up. She was still clutching the odd paper note. She tucked it into her pocket and opened the door. Mom was right there, relief painted across her face. Zola paid no attention to what she ordered for breakfast when the two of them stepped into the kitchen. She listened only half-heartedly as Mom yammered on as usual about how wonderful it was that ovens and refrigerators now function like the best 3D printers ever, able to create even the best gourmet meals in second, blah, blah, blah. Mom, Zola wanted to shout, how can you act like today's the same as every other day? How can you pretend everything's normal when I could whip out this weird note at any moment and start asking questions in front of the security cameras and everything? But the look in Mom's eye was more intense than usual. That, and the memory of Mom saying so grimly, people's lives might depend on it, kept Zola from doing anything but brushing her fingers against the note inside her pocket. If you want to see things as they really are, she thought. She glanced around the kitchen. It looked as it always did, with its usual spotless counters and cabinets that were only there for show. Everything they ate came out of the Insta-Oven or the Insta-Fridge, 2 stainless steel boxes that slid out like drawers from beneath the counters. The wall beside the table also held a drawer, so Mom and Zola could just shove their dishes into the combination robo-washer, robo-recycler, robo-composter as soon as they were done eating. Or, if they forgot that step, 𝑎𝑙𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 would turn on the table's self-clearing mode and slide the dishes away anyway. Above the table, the kitchen's picture wall showed a boring garden scene, something Mom must have chosen. Zola leaned in, ready to look closely even at that scene. But she knew her instinct was ridiculous. It wasn't like the picture wall showed their backyard as it truly was. Or does it? Zola wondered suddenly. She couldn't actually remember the last time she'd stepped foot in their backyard. There'd been no reason to. Ready for school? Mom was asking. Yeah, I think I'll walk today, Zola said, trying once again to make her voice sound normal. Of course you'll walk, 𝑎𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 interrupted. Centuries of research about what's best for kids shows that exercise before school is essential to... I mean outdoors, Zola said. For real. Mom frowned and gave a little shake of her head. Was that supposed to be some secret code? Some other clue about the note Zola had found in her Insta-Closet? But Mom quickly shifted into laughter. Oh, my little daydreamer, Mom said fondly, patting Zola's arm. Didn't you hear 𝑎𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 just give the weather report? I can repeat it, 𝑎𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 said with its usual exaggerated patience. You know I monitor all possible factors that might offer a pleasant stroll any time of day. The temperature outside is still a few degrees below the optimal 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 15.5 Celsius. That alone could make this a treadmill day, but there's also a 23.853% of a thunderstorm starting in the next 15 minutes. That's too high. Sorry. 𝑎𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 didn't sound sorry at all. You're so lucky, Zola, Mom exclaimed. It's not just that you don't have to walk to school through blizzards or even rain, or dust storms, desert heat, or swampy humidity. You don't have to go outside if the weather is anything but ideal. Laying it on a little thick there, Mom, Zola thought. As usual. Mom walked over to the treadmill in their living room and picked up Zola's VR goggles. You know, school's a virtual reality experience whether you're there in person or joining from home, Mom said, handing Zola the goggles. You know, that's one of the best things about education in the 22nd century. Consistency. Yeah, Zola mumbled, which was the reply she would have given regardless. But secretly she wondered, did Mom or 𝑎𝑙�𝑖𝑛𝑔 see the "come find me" part of the note I found in the Insta-Closet? Did they know I was planning to look outside? Not that she could have looked anywhere without all the sensors and security cameras seeing her. Not that she could have even been a second late to school without 𝑎𝑙𝑖𝑛𝑔 intervening. Zola slid the VR goggles back and forth in her hands. History VRs had taught her that way back at the beginning of the 21st century, people had used something called Google Glass, spectacles that linked them to a primitive digital world called the Internet. And then shortly after that, 21st century kids often played games using VR goggles that were just huge brownish boxes covering their eyes. In the history VRs, the kids in those goggles looked like they'd turned into Cyclops creatures. They always looked so funny jerking around and waving their arms at nothing. Zola's VR goggles were much more sophisticated than that. Oh, sure, they looked simple. They had a small, sleek black band at the front to cover her eyes without hiding them, and a wide black strap at the back to slip over her head in a way that never became painful even when she wore them for a long day of school and then homework or playtime afterward. But she knew the goggles contained just as much advanced technology as the picture walls or the Insta-Oven or the Insta-Fridge. She'd heard someone in a history VR describe them as the most elegant-looking swim goggles ever. And she guessed that was true. Not that she'd ever been swimming for real. That was because everybody used the VR goggles for everything outside their homes, and a lot of the time inside their homes too. The VR goggles meant that everyone could have full, rich, exciting lives without encountering the slightest risk of danger, ever. So how could anyone ever be lost? Zola wondered, remembering the plaintive "come find me" of the mysterious note in her Insta-Closet. How could anyone ever need her help for real? The beginning of chapter 3 basically describes a typical day at Zola's school, where she goes to school with kids from around the world because it's all virtual. She thinks about the note every now and then at school, and she almost lets it slip to tell her best friend about it, but she catches herself in time. It's when she goes home that her mother begins acting strangely. After school, when Zola finally pulled her VR goggles from her face and sets down on one of the living room tables, she was stunned to find Mom standing right there beside her, tapping her foot impatiently. "What did you eat for lunch that you got all over that shirt?" Mom asked. Automatically, Zola looked down. There was nothing on her purple shirt. And yet, Mom scrubbed a finger against the fabric covering Zola's belly button, as if she was trying to wipe away some disgraceful stain. "Quick," Mom said, "go throw this shirt in your Insta-Closet and put on, oh, I don't know, you've got a pair of pajamas ready, don't you?" What was wrong with Mom? She knew the routine. She's taught it to Zola. Pajamas were recycled every morning into a pair for the next night, so of course there would be something ready and waiting whenever Zola took off her school clothes. But it was truly odd for her mom to act like Zola should change instantly after leaving school, or to act as though she had a stain on her shirt when she didn't. Ooh, Zola thought, she's making an excuse to get me to look into the Insta-Closet again. "Oh, that must be chocolate pudding," Zola said. "Oops, I'll be right back." She practically ran into her room and over to the Insta-Closet. The door was slightly ajar. She whipped it open, stepped through, and closed the door behind her. The light around the full-length mirror came on automatically, illuminating the lightweight cotton pajamas folded neatly on the shelf off to the side. Zola lifted the t-shirt style top, which was such a bright hot pink it practically vibrated. And then Zola dropped the shirt. Something had been hidden beneath the shirt. It was rectangular, with a stiff-looking cover. Was it some kind of box? Or, no, the cover stretched across the top and the bottom of the thing, and along one of the longer sides. And there were pages of soft-looking paper in between the top and bottom covers. This was a book. Not an EEB, the term everyone used for books printed electronically, available only in digital form. This was a book as the term had originally been used, an old-fashioned, completely printed on paper book. Zola had seen such things in history of VRs before, but this book was real. Zola leaned closer. Now she could make out words on the cover, the letters hard to puzzle out since they were in an odd, old-fashioned script superimposed over a picture of strange old log cabins clustered together against a backdrop of heavy words. The words on the cover of this book said, "All my questions answered." That was exactly what Zola wanted, wasn't it? Then Zola noticed another, smaller line of type beneath the first set of words. The Jessie Keyser Story. This is the link. This is the link to the first book, Running Out of Time. Jessie Keyser is the main character of the story, Running Out of Time. This is the link. And do you remember Zola's last name? It's Keyser too. And that's where the two stories blend together. I wonder how this is going to turn out. Did you like the view of the future? I kind of did. I wouldn't mind having an Insta-oven or have self-cleaning dishes, something like that. But did you get an idea that even though the world sounded perfect, Mom and Zola don't think it's really perfect after all? I think some really interesting questions you might have are going to be solved by these two books. The first book is called Running Out of Time, and then its companion novel, Falling Out of Time, both by Margaret Peterson Haddix. The answers to questions 27 years later. Thanks for joining me on Chapter Book Story Time. I'm glad you could be here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.